Friends, have you ever yearned for respect, that basic human desire to be seen, to be valued, no matter your age, no matter the color of your skin? Have you ever felt that sting of injustice, that cold grip of fear when you're judged not for who you are, but for how you look? We all carry within us a deep-seated hope for fairness, a quiet dread of being marginalized. What happens, though, when that fear becomes a stark reality, when dignity is stripped away in broad daylight? Today, we have a story that will pierce your heart, a story about a black elderly man whose simple existence became a target for prejudice. Imagine the pain, the confusion, the sheer indignity of being humiliated simply for the color of your skin. But within this darkness, there sparked a moment of profound defiance, a moment where 5 simple words held the power to stop injustice in its tracks. What could those words be? What could possess such power that even a SWAT team, trained to act swiftly and decisively, would freeze in their steps? Let's dive in to see the incredible strength that can rise from the depths of despair. The Florida sun beat down on a quiet suburban street in Orlando, baking the asphalt and shimmering off the neatly trimmed lawns. Arthur, a man whose 80 years had etched wisdom and warmth onto his face, enjoyed the gentle rhythm of his days. He'd spend his mornings tending his small garden, the vibrant colors of his roses a testament to his patient care. His afternoons were usually filled with quiet reflection on his porch, watching the neighborhood kids ride their bikes, their laughter a sweet melody to his ears. His evenings were reserved for his beloved wife, Eleanor, their companionship a comforting anchor in the sea of time. Eleanor, with her kind eyes and infectious smile, was the heart of their home, her presence a soothing balm to Arthur's soul. One sweltering afternoon, their peaceful routine was shattered. A young woman, Tiffany, a new resident in the neighborhood, with hair the color of spun moonlight and eyes as blue as a summer sky, was walking her dog, a fluffy white Samoyed named Cloud. As Cloud playfully bounded onto Arthur's lawn, Tiffany hurried to retrieve him, a sincere apology already forming on her lips. "Oh, I am so sorry," she said, her voice genuinely contrite. "He just gets so excited." Arthur, his heart as gentle as the breeze rustling through his oak tree, smiled. "No harm done, young lady. He's a beautiful dog." Eleanor, hearing the voices, came to the porch, her warm gaze taking in Tiffany and Cloud. "Hello, dear. Don't worry about it. Our grandson used to do the same thing all the time." Tiffany's initial apprehension melted away under their kind smiles. She chatted with them for a few minutes, admiring their garden and sharing a little about her recent move. There was an easy, natural connection, a simple human exchange that transcended age and skin color. But this fleeting moment of neighborly warmth was about to be brutally interrupted. A sleek, dark sedan, its windows tinted, pulled up abruptly at the curb. 2 uniformed police officers emerged, their expressions grim and their movements sharp. "Mr. Arthur Jenkins?" one of them asked, his tone accusatory. Arthur, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach, nodded slowly. "Yes, that's me. We've received a report of a disturbance, a possible assault," the officer stated, his eyes scanning Arthur's calm demeanor with suspicion. Arthur and Eleanor exchanged bewildered glances. "Assault? But we were just talking with our neighbor," Arthur stammered, gesturing towards a visibly confused Tiffany. "Ma'am," the other officer addressed Tiffany, his voice curt. "Did this man assault you?" Tiffany's eyes widened in disbelief. "What? No, absolutely not. We were just having a friendly conversation. This is a misunderstanding." But their pleas seemed to fall on deaf ears. The officers' focus remained fixed on Arthur, their body language radiating distrust. The seed of suspicion had been planted, fueled by a prejudice as old and ugly as time itself. Neighbors, drawn by the sudden police presence, began to gather at the edges of their lawns, their faces a mixture of curiosity and concern. A murmur rippled through the small crowd, an unspoken question hanging in the air. What was happening? Then, the situation escalated with terrifying speed. A call went out, and within minutes, more police vehicles arrived, sirens wailing, their flashing lights painting the peaceful street in stark red and blue. A SWAT team, clad in tactical gear, their faces hidden behind masks, descended upon Arthur's home. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Arthur's calm. Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. Tiffany stood frozen, her earlier friendliness replaced by shock and disbelief. "Mr. Jenkins," a SWAT officer barked through a megaphone, his voice amplified and distorted. "Come out of the house with your hands raised. You are a suspect in a serious crime." Arthur, his heart pounding in his chest, felt a wave of humiliation wash over him. Here he was, a respected elder in his community, being treated like a dangerous criminal, on his own property, in front of his neighbors. The color of his skin, the assumption of guilt, it was a crushing weight. He wanted to shout, to explain, but his voice seemed trapped in his throat. Eleanor's silent tears were a dagger in his heart. Tiffany, finding her voice, tried to intervene. "Officers, you have the wrong person. He didn't do anything." But her pleas were ignored. The officers advanced, their weapons held at the ready, their focus solely on the elderly black man standing on his porch. The scene was surreal, a nightmare unfolding under the bright afternoon sun. Arthur felt a surge of anger, hot and righteous, battling against the rising tide of fear. He had lived a life of dignity, of hard work and respect for others. How could this be happening? How could he be reduced to a stereotype, a threat, based on nothing but the color of his skin? As the SWAT team closed in, their presence menacing and overwhelming, Arthur knew he had to do something. He had to break through this wall of prejudice, this rush to judgment. He had to reclaim his dignity, not just for himself and Eleanor, but for every person who had ever been judged unfairly. He took a deep breath, his gaze steady despite the tremor in his hands. And then, in a voice that, despite its age, resonated with strength and truth, he spoke 5 simple words. 5 words that hung in the air, silencing the sirens, stopping the advance of the officers, and sending a ripple of shock through the stunned onlookers. What were those 5 words? They were a testament to his character, a quiet declaration of his innocence, a poignant reminder of the shared humanity that lay beneath the surface of their assumptions. He looked directly at the officer in charge, his eyes filled with a lifetime of experience and an unwavering belief in justice, and said, "I have lived a good life." The effect was immediate and profound. The officer hesitated, his posture shifting almost imperceptibly. The other members of the SWAT team paused, their movements losing their rigid certainty. Arthur's words, spoken with such quiet conviction, cut through the noise and the assumptions. They were not the words of a guilty man, not the words of someone who had committed a violent act. They were the words of a man who had lived with integrity, who had built a life of respect and kindness. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with the weight of unspoken biases and the sudden realization that they might be terribly wrong. Tiffany stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "He's right. He and his wife are the kindest people. There's no way." Eleanor, finding her voice, added, her tone filled with quiet dignity, "We have lived in this neighborhood for 50 years. We have never caused anyone harm." The neighbors, who had been silent witnesses, began to murmur in agreement. Mrs. Henderson from across the street spoke up, her voice clear. "Arthur helps me with my garden all the time. He's a wonderful man." Mr. Johnson, a retired teacher, added, "He used to read stories to my children when they were little. He wouldn't hurt a fly." The tide was turning. The initial assumption of guilt, based on nothing but Arthur's appearance, was beginning to crumble under the weight of truth and the testament of his character. The officer in charge, his face still partially hidden by his mask, finally spoke, his voice less certain than before. "Sir, we received a report of a woman screaming." Arthur's brow furrowed in confusion. "Screaming? We didn't hear any screaming." Tiffany shook her head vehemently. "There was no screaming. My dog just barked a little when he ran onto their lawn. Maybe someone misheard." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. The initial confidence in their actions was visibly shaken. The 5 simple words, coupled with the outpouring of support from the neighbors, had forced them to confront the possibility that they had made a terrible mistake. The tension in the air slowly began to dissipate. The SWAT team lowered their weapons. The flashing lights seemed less menacing. The silence was now filled with a sense of dawning realization and a collective holding of breath. The officer in charge finally holstered his weapon. "Sir, we need to investigate this further. Please remain here." He turned to one of the other officers and spoke in a low voice, his words inaudible to the onlookers. Minutes stretched into an eternity as the officers conferred, their initial certainty replaced by a growing unease. The neighbors continued to speak up, sharing anecdotes of Arthur's kindness and integrity, painting a picture that stood in stark contrast to the image of a dangerous suspect. Finally, the officer in charge turned back to Arthur, his expression now a mixture of apology and embarrassment. "Mr. Jenkins, it appears there has been a misunderstanding. The call we received was inaccurate. We are very sorry for the intrusion, and the distress this has caused you and your wife." A collective sigh of relief swept through the small crowd. Eleanor leaned heavily on Arthur, her body trembling slightly, but the fear in her eyes was slowly being replaced by a weary relief. Tiffany rushed to Arthur's side, her hand touching his arm in a gesture of support. "I told them," she said, her voice still shaking. "You didn't do anything." The officers began to withdraw, the flashing lights receding, the sirens silent once more. The dark sedan that had brought the initial wave of fear now seemed smaller, less imposing. As the street slowly returned to its quiet normalcy, Arthur stood on his porch, Eleanor by his side, the warmth of the setting sun casting long shadows. The humiliation he had felt was still a raw wound, but something else had emerged from the ordeal, a renewed sense of the power of truth and the importance of community. Later that evening, as the stars began to pepper the night sky, Arthur and Eleanor sat on their porch, holding hands. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with a shared understanding of what they had just endured. "Those 5 words, Arthur," Eleanor said softly, breaking the silence. "They were so powerful." Arthur nodded, his gaze distant. "I just wanted them to see me, Eleanor. Not as a threat, but as a man who has lived a life with you." The experience left an indelible mark on the neighborhood. It sparked conversations about prejudice, about assumptions, about the importance of seeing beyond the color of someone's skin. Tiffany became a close friend of Arthur and Eleanor, often visiting and sharing stories. The neighbors, who had witnessed the injustice, became more vigilant, more willing to speak up against any hint of bias. The incident served as a stark reminder that prejudice can surface anywhere, even in the most peaceful of settings. But it also highlighted the power of truth, the strength of character, and the importance of a community standing together against injustice. Friends, what are your thoughts on this story? Have you ever witnessed or experienced a moment where assumptions based on appearance led to unfair treatment? Share your experiences in the comments below. We want to hear from you, from wherever in the world you are watching. Knowing our global reach helps us understand the impact of these stories. And before you go, please take a moment to press the like button. It's a small gesture that helps us share these important narratives with a wider audience. This story, and so many others like it, are for you, to spark conversation, to encourage empathy, and to remind us all of our shared humanity. The moral of this story, friends, is that true character speaks louder than any prejudice. In moments of darkness, the quiet strength of a life well lived can be the most powerful defense against injustice. Never underestimate the power of your own truth, and never be afraid to stand up for what is right.